You know, you drop your favorite coffee mug and you hear that agonizing shatter on the kitchen floor.
Oh, yeah. It is the absolute worst sound.
Right. We've all experienced that sudden spike of frustration. And then, I mean, the immediate reflex is to just grab a broom, sweep the shards into the trash, and pull up an app to buy a replacement.
Exactly. It's the ultimate consumer reflex. We are completely conditioned to view a flaw, like any structural compromise, as something that just totally voids an object's value.
Yeah, it's a binary. You know, it's
Uh,
either pristine and useful or it's broken and worthless.
right. There is no in-between for us usually.
But what if that fracture isn't an ending? What if the break is actually the prerequisite for a much more compelling chapter in that object's life? Welcome to the Real Japan podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a great topic today.
Today, we are taking you to a very specific, incredibly quiet corner of Tokyo. We're stepping out of the frantic energy of the Nihonbashi district and walking into a space that completely upends our modern throwaway culture.
It really does. It's a completely different mindset.
We are exploring the meticulous, centuries-old philosophy of Kintsugi. That's the traditional Japanese art of repairing ceramics with lacquer and gold.
And, it is so much more than just a repair technique. It's this fundamental shift in how we perceive vulnerability and history, both in the objects we use and, implicitly in ourselves.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the actual mechanics of how this is done, and believe me, the physical process is mind-blowing, I want to mention that you should visit the link in the description for the complete guide. It includes direct links to book the exact Kintsugi experience we're discussing today.
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to look into that.
And you will also definitely want to stick around until the very end of this discussion. We are going to uncover the strange chemistry of the traditional method, which it relies on ingredients you would expect to find in a sourdough bakery rather than an art studio.
Which is still just fascinating to me.
Right. And we'll also reveal the fascinating reason why traditional Japanese artisans actually hope you have a shaky hand when you sit down to work.
The contrast there between the rigid discipline of the craft and the embrace of human imperfection is what makes this so captivating.
So let's set the scene here. We are looking at the Utsuwa Nihonbashi Muto main store. Let's just refer to it as Muto for our discussion today.
Sounds good.
So this institution has been around since 1923. For most of its life, it operated as a high-end lacquerware wholesaler, outfitting these luxury department stores. But today, it serves a much more vital function, I think.
Oh, for sure.
They haven't just preserved the objects, they're preserving the mechanics of the culture itself by actually opening their doors to the public.
And that pivot is crucial. They recognize that tradition basically dies if it just remains locked behind a glass display case.
Right.
By hosting these hands-on workshops, they're shifting the public from being, passive consumers of Japanese culture to active custodians of it.
Right. You aren't just buying a bowl, you are learning the physical weight of its history. Which brings us to what you actually do when you walk into Muto. So for a starting point of about $227, you enter a 90-minute private session. And here's the first major surprise: you do not bring in your own shattered cereal bowl from home.
No, you don't.
The artisan provides the canvas for you. And they aren't handing you some cheap mass-produced scrap clay, right? They are selecting a renowned, high-quality Japanese ceramic specifically for your session.
Right, they use masterpieces like Oita Yaki, Kyokyo Mizuyaki, or Kutani Yaki. It instantly elevates the gravity of the room. You're being entrusted with a piece of tangible cultural heritage.
Wait, I have to stop you right there, because the logistics of this sound genuinely terrifying to me.
How so?
We are talking about an amateur, someone who might struggle to use a tube of superglue without fusing their own fingers together.
Oh, yeah.
And they
Yeah.
hand a museum-quality, potentially $500 Kutaniyaki bowl to a tourist and just say, have at it. How does that not end in a complete expensive disaster?
It is a totally valid concern. And honestly, it's exactly why the 90-minute modern method is so brilliantly reverse engineered. They don't just hand you the tools and walk away.
Okay, so they walk you through it.
Right. The entire environment is constructed to force you into a state of hyper-focus, stripping away any erratic movements. You start with the adhesive, but the applicator is what changes the game.
What do they use?
You don't use a brush or a squeeze tube. You apply the adhesive using the tip of a toothpick.
A toothpick.
Really, a toothpick.
So you're forced to work at this totally microscopic pace.
Precisely. If you used a brush, the adhesive would pool up. A toothpick relies on capillary action, ensuring you're only depositing the thinnest, most even layer of adhesive across the jagged fault lines of the ceramic.
Wow.
You have to check the fit from multiple angles, ensuring the microscopic topography of the brake locks back together perfectly before you apply any pressure at all.
I mean, that sounds less like a craft class and more like performing surgery. You're forced to narrow your entire worldview down to like a fraction of an inch of cracked clay.
And that narrowing of focus is intensely calming. It's very meditative. And then once the pieces are structurally bound, you move to the putty stage to fill in any missing fragments or microscopic chips.
Okay, so making the surface flush.
Yeah, and this is where the process becomes deeply tactile. You aren't just looking at the bowl. You use your fingers to slide the putty into the gaps.
Oh, wow. So you are literally tracing the physical trauma of the object. You're feeling exactly where it suffered an impact and filling that void.
Exactly.
And once that putty hardens, the filing process begins. And I imagine this isn't just about making it look nice, right? It's structural. You have to match the original curvature of the bowl so the mechanical stress is evenly distributed.
Yeah, that's the engineering behind the art right there. You use these specialized files to gently abrade the hardened putty until the surface tension is perfectly flush with the original ceramic glaze. You are essentially rebuilding the skin of the object.
I can just imagine that tactile feedback loop, feeling the rough edge slowly become seamless again. That must be incredibly satisfying.
It really is.
By the way, if just visualizing this tactile process is making you want to experience it firsthand, please take a moment to visit the link in the description for the complete guide. It has all the booking options to get you into that exact room in Tokyo.
It's highly recommended. So at this point in the workshop, you have basically completed the structural engineering part. The bowl is whole, it's structurally sound, and the surface is smooth.
But we haven't actually done the Kintsugi part yet, have we? We just have a repaired bowl with dull gray putty lines.
Right. This is the pivot from engineering to pure aesthetics. This is where we bring in the gold.
Okay, yes, the best part.
Yeah, they employ a technique closely related to maki, and this requires a fundamental shift in vocabulary. In the Kintsugi tradition, those lacquer lines you just spent an hour agonizing over are no longer referred to as cracks or scars or damage.
What do they call them?
They're formally called scenery.
Scenery! Wow. The Japanese term is kishiki, right?
Yes, kishi.
I am just obsessed with that reframing. Calling it a scar implies this lingering injury, but calling it scenery implies a landscape. It maps a journey across the surface of the object.
It completely alters your perception of value. So to paint this scenery, you take an incredibly fine brush, dip it into a mixture of a modern lacquer substitute and pure fine gold powder, and you begin to trace the seams you just filled.
Now, tracing a hairline fracture on a three-dimensional curved surface sounds like an absolute ergonomic nightmare, but the instructors have a specific mechanical trick for this, right?
They do. They teach you to plant your pinky finger directly onto the surface of the ceramic while holding the brush.
Okay, like a pivot point.
Exactly. It serves as a physical anchor. By locking your pinky to the bowl, you are stabilizing your fine motor control. It allows your hand and the bowl to move as a single unit.
But, I mean, even with that anchor, you are an amateur holding a brush full of actual gold over a premium piece of Aridayaki. Your hand is definitely going to shake.
Oh, absolutely.
Your pulse is going to cause the line to wobble. And this brings us back to the philosophy we teased earlier. The instructors at Muta explicitly tell you not to worry about an unsteady hand.
In fact, they welcome it.
Really?
Yeah. If your hand shakes, causing the gold line to swell slightly in one spot and thin out in another, they don't see that as a failure of technique.
Yeah.
That variance is what breathes life into the scenery.
Because a perfectly straight, uniform line would just look industrial. It would look like a machine stamped it on an assembly line.
Exactly.
But a wavering line is biological. It's a permanent record of the human nervous system interacting with that object at that exact second in time.
It is the ultimate expression of the human element. The imperfection is the sophistication. And this philosophy, it has a really profound emotional impact on the people who go through the experience.
You can see that impact so clearly when you look at the accounts of people who have actually sat at these workbenches. There is a review from someone visiting from the U.S. who specifically highlighted their instructor, Momoko.
Oh, yes. I remember that one.
Yeah, they didn't just praise her technical skill. They noted how her incredible patience manifested this physical sense of calm in the room. It transformed the session from a simple craft tutorial into this deep, meditative appreciation for patience itself.
And it transcends language, too.
Huh?
There was another account of a guest whose father took the workshop. The reviewer described looking across the table and seeing their father just laughing out loud, sharing this joyful, priceless interaction with the teacher and the translator.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they didn't need to share a native language to understand the shared goal of finding beauty in something broken.
It's such a beautiful image. But as we talk about the rebirth of these ceramics, we probably do need to issue a very stern practical caveat about what happens when you take this bowl home.
Yes, definitely. While the bowl is absolutely functional and makes for stunning tableware, it is no longer the indestructible diner mug you might be used to.
I'm assuming this comes down to basic physics. The thermal expansion rate of the ceramic is going to be wildly different from the thermal expansion rate of the lacquer in gold, right?
Exactly. If you subject this reborn piece to rapid temperature changes, those materials will expand and contract at different speeds.
Yeah.
And that will completely destroy the structural integrity of a repair.
So it'll just break all over again.
Right. Therefore, you cannot heat these pieces over an open flame. You absolutely cannot put them in a microwave. And under no circumstances should they go into a dishwasher.
I mean, if you just spent 90 minutes meditating over the microscopic topography of a bowl, treating it to a gentle hand wash in the sink is the absolute bare minimum of respect you owe it.
I completely agree. It demands an ongoing mindfulness. Now, everything we have discussed so far applies to the 90-minute modern version, which uses high-quality synthetic substitutes for the lacquer simply to make the workshop possible in a single afternoon.
Right. But Muto also preserves the old way, the authentic, centuries-old process.
They do. They offer an optional Honorushi add-on. Honorushi means genuine lacquer, harvested from the sap of the yushi tree. And opting for this is a monumental leap in commitment.
Yeah, it says here that this genuine lacquer takes anywhere from a day to several weeks to harden. Wait, why weeks? Modern glues cure in seconds. Why does tree sap take a month?
Well, because it doesn't actually dry in the way we understand paint or glue drying. When modern glue dries, its solvents evaporate into the air. Urushi does the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it cures through a complex chemical reaction driven by an enzyme called lactase. And that reaction requires the absorption of oxygen and ambient humidity.
So it's actively breathing in moisture from the air to polymerize and harden, rather than losing mass through evaporation.
Exactly. It becomes structurally denser. And because this curing process takes weeks, if you book the genuine lacquer experience, your instructor has to do the structural prep work far in advance of your arrival.
Yeah.
You just step in to handle the final aesthetic layers, but you still get to interact with all the traditional materials.
And this brings us to the bakery ingredients. When you look at what actually goes into the traditional adhesive and putty, it completely breaks your brain.
It's wild.
There are zero synthetics. To make the adhesive that binds the ceramic shards, they mix the raw urushi lacquer with plain wheat flour.
Which sounds completely absurd until you look at the molecular mechanics of baking.
Yeah.
Why do we use wheat flour in bread?
Well, because of the gluten. When you mix it with a liquid and work it, the gluten proteins unfold and cross-link, creating this massive microscopic web.
Right. So when you mix wheat flour with the urushi sap, that gluten network forms a biological matrix that captures the lacquer. It creates a biocomposite adhesive that is practically industrial strength, literally centuries before we invented carbon fiber.
Wow, it is brilliant engineering disguised as basic cooking, and the putty they use to fill the gaps is just as fascinating. They mix the lacquer with wood flour and something called tonoko, which is an incredibly fine powder milled from dried clay.
Yeah, and you don't just stir this in a cup. You take a spatula and you manually knead this mixture of sap, wood dust, and clay powder on a board.
The instructions here are so visceral, they tell you to keep kneading it until the putty feels as hard as an earlobe.
Think about how specific that is.
An earlobe.
Right. They don't give you a chemical ratio or a viscosity measurement. They give you a biological reference point. It requires the artisan to rely entirely on tactile feedback. It's exactly like a master baker kneading pasta dough. You have to physically feel the resistance in the material to know when the structural network is perfectly formed.
That is incredible. And then, once you have your earlobe textured putty locked into the cracks, you lay down the foundation for the scenery, you mix the lacquer with a polishing powder to create a rust-colored base, trace the seams, and then apply a layer of Bengora rushni,
which is a fiercely vibrant red lacquer. You carefully paint this over the rust foundation.
And the most surprising secret of this entire process, at least to me, is that once you apply that striking red lacquer, the gold is actually completely optional.
Yes, It is a totally valid aesthetic choice to stop right there. The visual contrast of the vivid red rivers against a dark or patterned ceramic is intensely beautiful on its own.
Oh, I bet.
The instructor will guide you, but the final aesthetic, whether it's pure red lacquer or shimmering gold, is a personal dialogue between you and the object.
That's just so profound. And just a quick reminder, if you want to explore the difference between the modern and traditional booking options, please visit the link in the description for the complete guide to Muto.
Absolutely do that. When you step back and look at the sheer physics and time required for the traditional method, the weeks of curing, the cultivation of gluten networks, the tactile judgment of the clay putty, it illustrates a profound psychological principle about value.
Yeah, we value what we bleed for. Or in this case, what we painstakingly need and wait weeks for.
Precisely. The traditional process teaches us that attachment is proportional to effort. In our modern ecosystem, when an item breaks, we throw it away and buy a replacement with one click.
Right.
There's zero friction, which means there is zero emotional investment. Kintsugi introduces massive friction. By pouring your time, physical labor, and organic materials into repairing a fracture, you don't just fix the object, you forge a profound, unbreakable attachment to it.
It totally transforms the item from a disposable commodity into a physical diary of resilience. And, we usually think about Kintsugi in terms of teacups and bowls, but imagine scaling this philosophy up to how we handle systemic damage. Think about urban planning.
Oh, that's interesting.
When a city is devastated by a disaster, the instinct is always to bulldoze and rebuild the streets to look exactly as pristine as they did before the trauma, to hide the scar.
So you're suggesting, architectural kintsugi?
Exactly. What if, instead of erasing the history of the fracture, a city rebuilt itself to highlight those fault lines? Turning the damaged infrastructure into public parks, or using contrasting materials to physically map where the city broke and where it healed. Treating a community's history as scenery rather than a shameful break that needs to be covered up. It completely changes how a society relates to its own survival.
That is a really powerful framework. Whether it's a ceramic bowl or a city grid, the cracks aren't evidence of failure. They are the exact places where the structure proved its capacity to endure.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of patience, chemistry, and beauty. We highly encourage you to check out Rob's multi-award-winning website to learn more about experiences just like this. You can find the link right down in the description.
Thanks for having me. There is an entire world of depth waiting to be uncovered when we stop discarding the fractured pieces of our lives and start looking at them as opportunities.